Okay, we're here with Jessica and we're going to go through 5 abdominal exercises. While we're working our abdominals today, we're going to focus on staying in a neutral spine, specifically neutral pelvis and neutral low back. So Jessica will just do a few little rocks forward and back of the pelvis. So as she rocks the pelvis back, the lower back is coming into the mat, and as she rocks the pelvis forward, the lower back is coming away from the mat. And what she's going to do is find a place in between those where there's a sense of space or physical space between the lower back and the pelvis, and she's staying in neutral. Here we're going to add on some exercises. And we're going to do a progression of exercises, starting with the most simple one and progressing to a more difficult one. Jessica will start by bringing one leg up to tabletop. And tabletop is 90 degrees at the hip and the knee. And then she's going to slowly lower that leg back down. She's going to alternate sides. And as she lifts and lowers the leg to tabletop and back down, she's trying not to move the pelvis. And she's trying to stay in neutral spine for her lower back and her pelvis. As much as she can, she's going to focus on using the abdominals to help lift the leg and do less work with the muscles of the thigh and the hip flexors and the quad. So the focus here is really on the abdominal muscles. And she's also keeping the neck and the shoulders and in between the shoulder blades nice and relaxed. The pace of the exercise is slow, and she's matching her movement with her breath. So she's going to inhale for one action and then exhale for the other. Okay, we're going to go into a harder version where she's going to come up to tabletop with both legs. So bringing one leg up to tabletop and then the other. Still focused on that neutral spine position. So if you bring both legs up and you notice that you've started to arch your back or press the back firmly into the mat, you're going to take a moment and correct and find that neutral position of the lower back and pelvis and the tabletop position of the legs. From here, she's going to start doing toe taps. Arms can be up. That will help make sure that you're not pressing the arms into the mat to help, and again helps you focus on using the strength of the abdominals to control the leg lowering and the leg lifting. Here she may notice that the neck's starting to want to help. So just softening the arms and the shoulders, letting the arms sink into the mat, relaxing the head, neck, and shoulders, and even the face. She's still matching her movement to the breath. So here she's exhaling as she lowers the leg down, and then inhaling as she brings the leg back up. Okay, our next variation, we're going to go into opposite arm and leg lift. So this is making it a little more challenge because we're adding in the longer lever of the arm and the long lever of the legs. So the start position is still that tabletop position we were just in. And then as she starts to move, arm and opposite leg are going to straighten out and reach towards the floor. And then they're going to come back up towards the ceiling. Now you can really vary the difficulty of this exercise by how far down you lower the leg. So Jessica will show a little easier version for the next couple where the leg's not lowering as low. Okay, and she's also doing it with a bent knee. So she's got a shorter lever. That's an easier version of this exercise, still moving opposite arm and leg. And now she's starting to make it more difficult where she's straightening the leg out, working with a longer lever. And she can make it more difficult even still if she lowers the leg down towards the mat. So the body is becoming more straight and parallel to the floor. She's still matching her movement to her breath, so exhaling as she lowers the arm and leg, inhaling as she comes back up to the ceiling. Let's do one more on each side. And as you fatigue, if you notice you're starting to lose your neutral spine position, instead of stopping, you could just change the movement of the lever. So going back to the bent leg lever or the toe tap position is always a good option. Okay, next exercise, she's going to start with both legs down. She's going to straighten one leg out.
Let's show this one first.
Yeah, perfect. And one of the goals of this exercise is really to stay in a neutral pelvis position. Here the pelvis is going to want to start to twist as we do a circling action of the hip. So the oblique muscles are going to start to work a little bit more. She's going to hover the straight leg off of the mat and do small and slow little circles of that leg, working on the bottom part of the circle, so almost skimming the heel towards the mat every time she circles around. and not bringing the leg too high. You'll be tempted to bring the leg up high and overwork through the hip flexors, so we want to keep it a small action and be really specific on keeping the hips and pelvis really still, or the pelvis still. And you can see here that Jessica has laid her hands across the pelvis, so that will give her more feedback. Can you show me, Jessica, what it would look like if you weren't keeping the pelvis still and there was too much movement happening? Okay, so you can see as she starts to move her hip around that the pelvis is starting to rotate. Now she's going to work to control that, so oblique muscles are kicking in a little bit more. She's keeping a good connection between the ribs and the pelvis, so maintaining that space, meaning she's staying in neutral spine. And then circle the other way, Jess. So switching directions. I always joke with my students that I want them to make a circle and it shouldn't look like a potato. So trying to make this as low and smooth as they can. And still breathing as you go ahead and do these circles and keeping the other leg nice and still. Okay, and you can repeat that exercise on both sides. So we'll just show a few on the other side. And one mistake we sometimes make is the leg that is still starts to go out to the side as a counterbalance. So we want to work on keeping that leg and that knee straight up to the ceiling. And again, keeping the pelvis still, using the hands as some feedback. And when you think you've mastered it, check in and see if you're breathing. Check in and see if you're using most of the work is happening through the abdominals, and here the abs are working together with the leg and the hip flexor muscles, and that you're staying relaxed through the head, neck, shoulders. Okay, last one in this series is going to be your obliques. So starting with both legs up, hands are going to go behind the head. And this is really important that we're not doing this exercise with the neck. So the hands are creating a lot of support for the head. And you can have the elbows wide or the elbows can go more narrow depending on your shoulder flexibility and what's comfortable. But what you want to make sure you do is maintain a little space between the chin and the chest. So we're never pulling the head forward. So go ahead, Jessica. She's going to start doing a bicycle action of the legs. As she exhales, she's going to lift and twist towards the knee. Inhale, come back through center, and then switch to the other side. Okay, I really like our students to come back down to the center, whether they come down to touch the mat or just to hover above the mat. And it's not a rest, it's just making sure that we're practicing this action of lowering and lifting. Exhale as she twists. Inhale, back towards the mat. And she can work on varying the difficulty of this by how low the leg goes. So if she reaches the leg really low, that's going to be more difficult, versus she points the toes more towards the ceiling. That's going to be more simple. So show us this little simple version. So she's got a longer version and a shorter version of the leg lowering. Okay, let's do a few more. As she's twisting, we're really just twisting enough to bring the shoulder blade away from the mat and then place the shoulder blade back down. If she tries to reach the elbow towards the knee, there's going to be way too much movement happening. It's going to be harder for her to stay in neutral spine. So the goal is not to touch, the goal is just to reach towards. And she's still focused on her breath. Exhale as she lifts and twists. Lots of support for the neck. Inhale as she comes back through center. Last one. Okay, great. So that's a little series of abdominal exercises from more simple to more complex. Thanks, Jess.